Hello all, welcome to the second video in the book review and summary series that I've been trying to do. Last week we looked at a book with the title AI Superpowers by Kai-Fu Lee. The video link is available in the description below. This week I've chosen a book which is a little different from the books that I generally read. Of late I've started to read books around the human body, the physiology of human body, the science around it, etc. and all of that. It started to intrigue me. This book falls in that bucket. The book's title is Why Do We Sleep by Matthew Walker. Now Matthew Walker is a professor of neuroscience and psychiatry in UC Berkeley. He's a former professor of psychiatry at Harvard. And the author, using this book, tries to deconstruct the mystery behind sleep, the mechanics behind it, and what are the things that we should do and should not do with respect to sleep that can hamper our well-being. Now, at the end of the book, the author has given a set of 12 things that one should do to have a solid and serene sleep. I have jotted all those 12 points at the end of this video as well. Why at the end is because they'll help you understand why do you need to do all of these things as you go through the entire summary of the video. Now the book is broken into 4 key parts. Before we go deeper into the understanding of the book is a very thick book. It has a lot of content, there's a lot of information. It was certainly not a breeze like the previous book. It took me at least 2 weeks and at least a couple of rereads for me to understand the content, etc. Now, the book has 4 parts in particular. The first portion is around deconstructing the funda of sleep. Second portion is why we should sleep, and if you don't sleep, what happens. The third portion is around the dream in particular, because you usually associate sleep with dream. So he tries to understand why do we dream, how does it help our body, or is it just a byproduct of sleep. He tries to deconstruct that. The last portion is around how as a society we have understood sleep and how it has impacted our behaviors over time is what he tries to give. Of course, he concludes with the 12 things that I spoke about. Now, moving on to the first portion of the book, which is around deconstructing sleep. Now, it has at least 4 or 5 chapters in this part. Right? Now, if I have to give you 2 or 3 things that you should take away from this, they are the funda of circadian rhythm, the REM and non-REM sleep. The last portion is how do these interplay across our different life stages of a human being, right? And how do they vary in terms of the content itself. Now, circadian rhythm, most of us might have heard here and there. The funda behind it is very simple. There is a suprachiasmatic nucleus which is there in our brain, which is the epicenter of the circadian rhythm. It is called the biological clock, if you all are aware of it. It has a 24-hour cycle. It is a sinusoidal wave that goes. Basically, it follows a certain path. Right? As the circadian rhythm starts at the start of the day, you have this urge to wake up in the day. You become very active through the middle portion of the day, and it starts to dwindle down as the day progresses, and it goes down, right? And it again kicks up the next day. This is the circadian rhythm which is there, and it is there in all of us. All of us have this urge to wake up, etc. That is the clock which is there, which wakes you up in the morning, is because of the circadian rhythm. Now, alongside it, there is something called as a sleep pressure which is there. Basically, it is a chemical that gets built up in your body if you don't sleep on time regularly. So, the quantum of this chemical in the body also starts to pile up through the day. So, both the circadian rhythm and this sleep pressure starts to pile up. But you don't get to feel the pressure to sleep because circadian rhythm starts to peak through the day. But through the evening and afternoon, you will see that circadian rhythm starts to fall, but the sleep pressure continues to rise. And wherever the gap between the circadian rhythm and the sleep pressure is the maximum, that is around the late evening or night, is when you get the urge to sleep, and hence you go to sleep. This is a normal behavior between sleep pressure and circadian rhythm. But of course, there are situations where you might have pulled out an all-nighter because of an exam, or you want to read something, or you want to binge watch something, etc. In which case, you would have noticed it actually, you would have heard the urge to sleep through midnight, 2, 3 o'clock, etc., and all of that. But somewhere around 5, 6 o'clock, you will feel that you are full of energy and you want to wake up and do things. Right? You would have lost that urge to sleep. And that is primarily because while the sleep pressure was mounting through the night and it was forcing you to sleep and the circadian rhythm was at its low, early in the morning circadian rhythm picks up again for the next day, and hence it overshadows the sleep pressure which was there, and hence you feel this urge to wake up. But of course, what happens is through the next day, somewhere in the afternoon, it starts to dwindle down the circadian rhythm. The sleep pressure which was mounting continues to mount, and then hence you feel a very strong urge to sleep somewhere around 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon of the next day. Right? And this is how this whole funda works. And it is very important we understand this as we go through the summary. You will realize it. Now, the second portion that I want to talk about, which is very important for you to understand, is the different segments of the sleep, which is the REM segment and the NREM segment. What is REM? REM is basically rapid eye movement, and NREM is the non-rapid eye movement portion. When you say rapid eye movement, you must have understood when you sleep, actually your eyes move back and forth. To your sides, either side. You must have seen this in kids and babies primarily. You would see them when they're actually sleeping, their eyes rolling all over the place with such pace. This is called as rapid eye movement. When you sleep, our brain goes through both these phases, one after the other, with a certain pattern in it, REM phase and the NREM phase. And both of them have its own significance in our the neural health and the processing of information. Now, what happens when you actually have the REM sleep? Basically, the REM sleep, you should imagine it as something like an information abstractor. Whatever you learned through the day, it tries to abstract information around it. It tries to connect all the neural paths that were there and creates a story, connecting it to whatever you already know about it, and creates a new file into your catalog of information. That is what happens in the REM phase. And this is basically the phase where you actually dream, right? And then the NREM phase is where it does a lot of movement of information from short term to long term. It tries to retain all these information from short term to long term, and hence both these phases are very, very important for the well-being of the neural health. Now, you might be wondering what would happen if you don't sleep properly for the usual allocated time of around 8 hours. That's the general recommended time for an adult, right? If you don't sleep, both of them take a hit actually. And the time to recover, you might assume that, let's say that you don't sleep for 8 hours, you sleep for 4 to 6 hours, and then you carry over that to the weekend and you try to sleep for 12 hours, 15 hours, all of this should be recovered. Actually, it does not happen that way. The time to recover is significantly very, very high for any damage that is done to the cycle of the REM and non-REM period in your natural sleep. So it is very, very important that we don't cut short sleep. The other portion in this area of understanding sleep better is around the different phases of a human's life cycle, starting from being in the womb of a mother to when you become very old. How do these cycles interplay? Now, we all know that people generally tend to read stories, sing songs to babies which are in the womb. But actually, the child is actually in a sleep state, right? It is always sleeping there. Of course, it might hear whatever you are saying, etc. But the child is always sleeping in the womb. It goes through the REM cycles, NREM cycles, and there is an unknown cycle which it goes through, which we have not yet comprehended. Now, it is proven scientifically that if the REM cycle of the child is disturbed by whatever means, the growth, the growth of the brain and the neural networks within the brain are severely impacted if the REM cycle of the infant, the child in the womb, is affected. Which is why it is highly recommended that pregnant women do not consume alcohol, because alcohol is known to be a strong sedative and it impacts the REM cycle, right? It is scientifically proven. Which means that it goes through the placenta. If a pregnant woman consumes alcohol, it goes to the placenta to the child and it impacts the REM cycle of the child, and hence it affects the growth, the normal growth of the child, right? It's a very key point that I wanted to call out in this portion. Now, of course, as we go through the next stage, which is the infant stage, we all know infants are very difficult to handle in terms of their sleeping pattern, right? We have a certain circadian rhythm. We wake up at 6, go to sleep at 10 probably, and that is how we cycle. But the infants have a very weird pattern, right? You are not able to comprehend when they would sleep, when they would wake up, etc. And that is primarily because that suprachiasmatic nucleus that I was talking about, the clock which is there in your brain, is not yet very well developed in the infant. It is still in the developing phase, which means that there is no circadian rhythm for the child. It goes to sleep whenever it wants to, when it feels tired basically, or it wakes up whenever it wants to. And hence this problem. So, and we should understand that portion of it, and it will help us handle these situations better. Similarly, as the child grows into a late childhood adolescent stage, there is a strategic shift in terms of the portion of NREM cycle and REM cycle in the brain, right? And there's a complete rewiring that happens in the brain, and that is one of the reasons why we generally tend to see adolescents being irrational. Why? Because there's a lot of rewiring that continues to happen there. So one big wiring happens when the child is at the womb and in the infant stage. The second big change happens when you are in the adolescent stage, right? And the parents need to understand all of this, because there is always a tussle between the adolescents and the parents who are there. In fact, the circadian rhythm also starts to see a major shift, which used to be the circadian rhythm, which used to be alongside the rhythm of a child, is moving towards an adult. There's a very clear transition phase that happens in the rhythm as well. Hence, adolescents go to sleep very late in the day, while the parents would recommend them to go to sleep very early in the day. All of these confusion continues to happen. Now, as we move into midlife and old age, of course, the circadian rhythm continues to make changes, and hence, if you see old people, they generally go to sleep very early and wake up very early in the morning. All of these issues are there. And the NREM also starts to take a back seat in the whole proportion of REM versus non-REM sleep pattern. Right? This is all the mechanics of sleep, how it functions, etc., and all of that, which is very critical for us to understand, because some of the activities that we do in our families and society, we tend to be over emotional about it, and if we understand these portions, we can be a little more prudent about these decisions that we make. The next portion is around why should we sleep, and if you don't sleep, what happens, right? That is the big portion. I think I would recommend all the viewers to pay attention to this, right? It is very, very important that we understand while there are a lot of good things that can happen if you sleep, the side effects or the negative effects of if you don't sleep is all the more worrying, right? This part of the book was very, very depressing actually, right? He spoke about a variety of diseases that one could get affected by if you don't sleep properly. Of course, all with scientific evidence. Now, he starts off with a very simple thing, which is the drowsiness that you see, because of which people cause accidents, right, in highways. You must have heard about something called as a micro sleep. You actually don't go to sleep, but your eyelids are closing for a very short amount of time that you don't even know that you are sleeping actually. You might assume it to be blinking, but you're actually sleeping, which means that your motor controls are not in your control actually, right? It causes a lot of accidents. The number is staggering. We all know that. Which is why this fund of power naps was brought into the domain, right? Power naps were basically started in flights actually. When transatlantic flights happen, it's a very long flight. Hence, the aviation industry thought about it, and this 20 to 30 minute naps were brought into picture to help pilots recover from fatigue during these long travels. Of course, we have used it to other business use cases, etc., and all of that. And the author very clearly talks about that it is something that should be used for the specific purpose for which it was built, and not publicized for the other ways that we are doing. Any other person who does not need to do a power nap should not do a power nap, and he needs that 8 hours sleep that is required. Right? Now, talking about the variety of issues that the lack of sleep can bring about. It starts from your brain, right? The forgetfulness, the psychiatric disease that can bring about. He tries to connect with scientific evidence to autism and ADHD. Then there is this call out around increasing blood pressure, heart attacks. Blood pressures happen because of calcification around the arteries, vessels, right? It's proven again that if you sleep properly, the calcification rate starts to dwindle down. It has severe impacts around your reproductive system. It in fact changes your DNA as well, right? So he talks about children not having required amount of sleep across the globe, because of which their DNA could be altered drastically and for generations to come. So it's a very important call out that he makes. The last point that he talks about is around the learning, the memory retention, and the muscle memory that we keep talking about. There's nothing called as muscle memory basically. If you are trying to learn a sport or if you're trying to learn an instrument, it has to be registered by the brain, and only then the signal can be passed back to your respective portion for it to be recreated, right? For this to happen, it is very important you sleep properly after you learn something. If you learn something and you don't sleep, in the REM and the NREM portion, there is a certain work that happens which creates that gist and moves it back to your long-term memory. If you don't sleep, this becomes a short-term memory and it does not get moved on to the back area, right? From the RAM to your hard disk, it does not happen. Which means that you could pass the test the next day or you could play the game the next day for a very short while, but it won't be a long-standing thing, right? So even out. The next portion is around dreaming. Why do we dream? Is it actually helpful in our well-being? Dreaming, is it actually helpful, or is it just a byproduct that happens and we seem to be having a good time about dreaming actually? Sigmund Freud has done a lot of work around this. He talks about a couple of portions around it. Sigmund Freud proposed theories around why do we dream, what are the components within the dream. It is our inherent desires which come out as dreams, etc. and all of that. But there's not a lot of scientific evidence that is there. These are all theories which are there as is. There are some scientific studies that some people have done around it to decode the dreaming in particular. Of course, after MRI scans have come in, they were able to place electrodes around our heads and see if certain portions of the brain get triggered or flashed out when you dream. Of course, you're able to see that. If you see a lot of dreaming around movement, etc., a certain portion of the brain gets triggered, right? So that is very, very easily visible in the MRI. But what exactly is a dream? Predicting that is still a long way away. We'll have to see how that happens, pans out, etc. Now, there is a very clear link between dreaming and creativity. Why? Because when you dream in the REM phase of your cycle, and the REM phase we very clearly know is all about synthesizing, right? Synthesizing whatever is that you have learned, generating an abstract and a gist out of it, visualizing it, etc. It is all about that dream, and hence REM cycle is connected to that, which means that if you have to be a very creative person, you'll have to have a very solid sleep and a solid REM cycle in your sleep. The last portion of the book is more around the societal impact, etc., where he starts off with the function of sleeping pills. Do they actually help us to sleep? They are mostly a sedative, like alcohol, and they are not sleep enablers as is. But there are a lot of side effects because of it. So he recommends, of course, one to not use it unless absolutely necessary. And that is where he talks about the 12 things that one could do to bring about a natural sleep. And the funny point about alcohol, he talks about it here. Alcohol usually takes 6 to 8 hours for it to get detoxed from our body, which means that if you consume alcohol sometime late in the night, it would never go out of your body and you will never have a proper solid sound sleep through the night. Which means, he says, of course it is against general norms, but he recommends you to take alcohol early in the morning. But how would you do that, etc., is all left to you. So the next portion is around what are the things in the society that is impacting our sleep. He starts off with the artificial light, which you see all around, till candles and oil-based lamps, whether at least we were okay. But the moment the incandescent bulbs were invented by Edison, this thing has seen a very paradigm shift. The way we sleep, the patterns, etc., and all of that. Now, we might assume that it's just a small light which is there, or a table night lamp which is there next to me, but he gives you actual numbers as to how a very small amount of light can impact your circadian rhythm and the secretion of a chemical called as melatonin which is the chemical that gets secreted the moment the body realizes that you have to hit the bed, right? So the impact of artificial light on the secretion of the chemical is very clearly proven, and we should avoid doing that is the point. Now the people we use Kindles, iPads, etc. read books before they hit the bed, and that is a very bad thing to do. He recommends using physical hard books to read. Of course, I read all of this in Kindle, but it's a different point. Right? Then the second portion of this last part is more around how, as a society, how do we treat the sleeping pattern and behavior. The whole work culture is built around people who wake up early in the morning, who go to work early in the morning and come back home, right? But there are a set of people who actually wake up very late in the day and go to sleep very late in the day. It is not a bad thing to be like that, is the point, right? It is basically how their genetic, the gene and the DNA is wired in such a way for these people, for them to wake up late in the day. There's nothing bad about it, but we as a society have not actually understood that very well. Of course, there are companies in the recent times have started to get into all of this, and they are giving you flexible work schedules, allowing you to come into office at whatever point in time, etc. You have sleep pods which are there in Google and companies, others, similar companies, which have understood the importance of sleep and hence the connection to that, to creativity and delivering solid results, right? The portion that I want to close before I finish the summary is around how do we treat children with respect to sleep, in terms of sending them to school very early in the morning. I see school starting as early as 7 o'clock, 7:30, and the author talks about the situation in the US wherein it impacts the sleeping pattern of children very, very badly, and how it tries to kill the neural building, very basic building blocks that are happening in these children, how this kind of behavior is affecting the children in particular. Now, as you see, these are the four big portions in the book. Now, as I promised, we'll just talk about how do we, we know these are the problems which are there with respect to sleeping, and the technology all around us is a big problem. It is not allowing us to sleep properly. How do we get away from all of that? We can't throw away technology overnight, so we have to try to coexist. And that is where he talks about these 12 points which will help us get a better sleep and a natural sleep. What are these 12 points are? He asks you to stick to a sleep schedule. Like how you have an alarm to wake up, you should have an alarm to go to sleep as well. Exercising is a great thing to do. Having a lot of physical tiring effort will force you to sleep very quickly, but please don't exercise 30 minutes before you actually go to sleep, because the body's temperature will be very, very high when you exercise for another 2 to 3 hours. If your body temperature is very high, you can't sleep. It has to cool down for you to sleep. You won't get sleep actually. You should avoid caffeine and nicotine because it takes at least 8 hours to wear off, and caffeine and nicotine actually block the areas which help you to sleep. Avoid alcohol, we spoke about it. Avoid large meals and carbohydrate driven meals and beverages before you go to sleep. Right? Have very simple snacky food. Avoid medicines that affect your sleep pattern. Some flu medicines and cough medicines generally tend to affect the sleep pattern, so unless absolutely necessary, avoid using those. And don't take naps after 3 p.m. in the day, because if you do that, the rhythm breaks and you can't sleep later in the night. We all know that generally. Important point is, before you hit the bed, try to relax yourself. Try to read a book or listen to soothing music that will help you go to sleep very easily. Take a hot bath before you go to bed. Don't use dark, cool, have a dark, cool and gadget-free bedroom. Right? Don't use your mobile phones. Right sunlight exposure through the day is very, very important. Try to have at least 30 minutes of natural sunlight that hits your body. And don't lie in the bed awake for a very long time. If you're not able to sleep, go do something, some relaxing activity that can get you back to sleep. Because if you keep rolling around, you're never going to get sleep. Right? So do these 12 things, and I think these seems very reasonable and logical for us to do in spite of having all these distractions and technology that is all around us. And hopefully we all should have a solid, sound sleep going forward. I hope this summary helps you to change your basic sleeping behaviors and habits in terms of binge watching or trying to be awake for a long period in time, doing a lot of work, etc. I hope it gave you at least some kind of a push to move away from something like that into having a natural, solid sleep and thereby have a better well being. Thank you for watching.